The notice was taped to my mailbox like a scarlet letter. $350 fine. Unauthorized paint alteration. Dated April 12th, 8:37 a.m. I hadn't painted anything. They even attached a photo of my own hand holding yesterday's mail, circled in red, as if proof of ownership were a crime. Welcome to my channel. I'm Eric Dawson, civil engineer, homeowner, father of one daughter who thinks HOA means horribly overbearing adults. If you're new here, pull up a chair, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and tell me where you're watching from. It always amazes me how far these stories travel across America's cul-de-sacs. I moved to Ridgefield Commons 3 years ago, right after my wife Clara passed. The house was meant to be a reset for me and our daughter Lila, single story, good schools, quiet. Clara's dream was to plant a red maple line along the front walk. The HOA said it violated uniform canopy policy. We compromised on dwarf cedars. I thought that was the end of it. Then came the letter about the mailbox. White post, federal height, standard dimensions, checked twice with the USPS manual before installing. Still, the envelope bore that same embossed HOA seal, the kind you can feel through the paper. Failure to maintain uniform aesthetics. It wasn't about paint, it was about control. At the next board meeting, President Marla Tennant smiled thinly across the folding table. "Eric, it's nothing personal," she said, tapping a clipboard. "We simply can't have individuals altering common view fixtures." "It's on my parcel," I reminded her. "Common view," she repeated, like the word erased the boundary line surveyed in 1998. That night, Lila asked if we were going to lose the house like Grandpa lost his farm. I told her no, but the image stayed, the auction sign, the sheriff's tape. Loss, once it finds you, learns your address. Over the next week, I cataloged every notice taped to neighbors' doors. 11 in total. Trash cans, lawn edges, basketball hoops. One woman cried because her husband was stationed overseas and she couldn't attend the mandatory repaint hearing. I started a spreadsheet, columns for date, citation code, fee amount. Patterns reveal themselves when you count them. By April 26th, mine was the only mailbox fine still unpaid. The HOA issued a lien warning, threatening foreclosure within 90 days. I could pay $350 and be done. Instead, I decided to learn why this board treated personal property like rented scenery. Knowledge. Nugget number 1. Under most state statutes, an HOA cannot lien or fine over fixtures that are not designated as common elements in the recorded declaration. If it's not in that document, they're bluffing. I spent evenings in the county records room downtown, fluorescent hum above stacks of brittle plats. The Ridgefield Commons Declaration of Covenants, recorded May 12, 1998, listed shared perimeter fencing, entry monument, and retention pond as common elements. No mention of mailboxes. Still, I wanted more than a gotcha. I wanted accountability. So I printed 20 certified copies of that page, sealed them in evidence sleeves, and waited for their next move. 3 days later, Marla showed up while I was mulching the front bed. "Eric, I need you to sign this compliance plan," she said, holding a carbon pad. "I need you to sign this receipt," I said, handing her the certified copy. "For delivery of governing documents you appear not to have read." Her smile twitched. "You think you're clever?" "No," I said. "Just literate." She walked off, heels sinking into the asphalt, clipboard bouncing like a metronome of irritation. I could almost hear the gears turning. Retaliate, escalate, justify. They always do. If you've ever faced an HOA that treats power like a hobby, you already know the tone of those letters, the condescension wrapped in cursive signatures. Tell me in the comments, are you firmly anti-HOA, or have you dealt with one that nearly pushed you out? Share one tactic that helped you stand your ground. Someone scrolling tonight might need it. That evening, my neighbor Frank, retired postmaster, hands stained with old ink, leaned over the fence. "They pulled this on Pine Hill back in '09, he said. "Board tried to fine a guy for repainting his curb numbers. Lost in court, cost him 10 grand. He chuckled, wheezy but amused. "Paper beats clipboard every time." I nodded, though inside I felt something colder than amusement, because the notice I'd just received in the mail wasn't about paint anymore. It was a behavioral compliance warning, citing disruptive conduct toward board officials. The price of standing up had just doubled, and the countdown to 90 days had already begun. The next morning, 2 uniformed officers stood at my porch. One of them held a folded printout, wellness check requested by Ridgefield Commons HOA. It was 8 in the morning, and I was holding a coffee mug with number 1 dad, faded to gray. "Sir, we got a report you might be in distress or acting erratically toward neighbors," the taller officer said. I looked at Lila's bike in the driveway, the pink streamers fluttering. "Does mowing in straight lines count as erratic?" He exhaled through his nose, weary. "We figured as much. Sorry to bother you. Just need to log we spoke." After they left, I read the timestamp on the HOA's email. 7:51 a.m., 9 minutes before the knock. They weren't even pretending anymore. That night, I called an attorney named Mark Hale, a quiet man who sipped from a steel thermos and kept his cuffs rolled up, revealing ink smudges like battle scars. He'd handle at HOA disputes before. "They overstep, we push back," he said. "You documented everything? Every notice, every fine, every word. Good. Stay calm. Don't provoke them. They're baiting you for a violation escalation." He told me to file a complaint with the state HOA Ombudsman's Office, Section 12431 of the Common Interest Community Act. They have 30 days to respond, or it's deemed ignored. That's leverage, Eric. By mid-May, Ridgefield Commons had racked up 12 open complaints, 8 of them mine. Still, the fines kept coming. $50 for grass edge irregularity, $100 for exposed mulch contrast. I could almost see Marla dictating these into her phone, smiling like a cat at a fishbowl. The second engagement moment was brewing in my head. If you've ever been on the receiving end of an HOA wellness check or some fake citation meant to scare you, drop your story in the comments. We share so others can fight smarter. If you haven't yet, leave a message for those HOA lurkers reading here. They always do. Late one night, I parked near the clubhouse and waited. At 9:47 p.m., lights flickered inside. Through the blinds, I saw Marla and Treasurer Ken stack envelopes into a banker's box. I took a time-stamped photo from the sidewalk. Public space. Next day, I asked our mail carrier, "Any chance those letters went through the USPS system?" She laughed softly. "Nope. They bulk drop at doors. That's not mail. That's paper pretending to be law." That's when I saw the angle. Fraud through misrepresentation of official correspondence. Federal jurisdiction, if they claim to mail it. Knowledge. Nugget number 2. Misusing postal markings or implying federal delivery without postage can trigger Title 18 FOR 1341, mail fraud, if done to obtain money or property. I wasn't going to call the feds yet, I just needed to line up proof, dates, delivery methods, the HOA's own bylaws contra, addicting themselves. On May 24th, they posted a new rule. All mailboxes must be uniform white, shade 7027 eggshell. It was the same shade I already had. The ordinance wasn't about paint, it was about submission. Frank leaned on my fence again. "You know, they lease the common areas from the developers LLC. 10-year term, renews June 30th, unless the HOA board files a notice of intent to renew." I froze. "You're sure?" He nodded. "Saw it when I helped them switch insurance carriers last year. They probably forgot." That was my first glimpse of leverage, buried in a lease set to expire in 37 days. If that renewal didn't get filed, the HOA lost control of the very spaces they lorded over: the pond, the entry sign, the mailbox design standard. I pulled property records again, and there it was. Leasehold agreement between Ridgefield Commons Homeowners Association, Inc. and Northgate Development Holdings, LLC. Effective July 1st, 2013, 10-year term. Clause 11. Automatic termination, absent timely renewal notice by certified mail, no later than 30 days prior to expiration. No one had mailed anything. June 1st was tomorrow. 29 days left. I didn't tell Mark yet. Not until I had something tangible. I wanted to feel the weight of that secret like a stone in my pocket. That night, the HOA website posted my name under non-compliant homeowners, public notice. It listed my address, unpaid fines, and ongoing behavioral monitoring. Lila cried when a classmate showed her. "Why would they put your name online, Dad?" "Because they're scared," I said. "And scared people make mistakes." Inside me, something shifted. Not rage, not revenge, but focus. They'd drawn the line. I would draw the blueprint. Tell me, viewers, where should the line actually be? How far should an HOA control your porch, your lawn, your mailbox? Where's the limit between community standards and personal rights? Drop it below, or at least like the video if you've ever seen that line crossed. Because by sunrise, I was drafting a certified letter of my own, not a complaint. A notice of ownership transfer request, addressed to the developer's LLC. If this lease was a gate, I was about to find the latch they forgot existed. The post office clock read 8:02 a.m. when I slid that certified envelope across the counter. To Northgate Development Holdings, attention, Property Management Division. The clerk stamped it with the kind of finality I hadn't felt since Clara's death certificate, ink sealing a change that couldn't be undone. Back home, I scanned my own copy, labeled it Lease Option Inquiry June 1st, and dropped it into folder 4B of the Ridgefield file box, right between Notices, Official, and Notices, Fake. The lid clicked shut with a metal snap that echoed like a promise. By Monday, June 5th, Northgate's reply arrived, a thin, polite letter confirming receipt of my inquiry. But what mattered was the sentence halfway down. Our records show no renewal notice has been received from Ridgefield Commons Homeowners Association as of this date. I called Mark. So what happens if they miss the 30-day renewal window? They lose their management rights to those common assets. The lease terminates automatically. No board vote can fix it. I read that line again. No board vote can fix it. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, but realizing the wind was finally at my back. The next HOA meeting was June 12th. I went in quietly, notebook under my arm. The air smelled of dry coffee and power trip. Marla's voice carried across the rec center, clipped and crisp. We've issued 6 additional fines this quarter. Compliance is improving. I waited until open homeowner comment. Then I raised my hand. Eric Dawson, Lot 17, I said. Could the board confirm whether a renewal not? ICE for the common area lease was mailed to Northgate Development? Her pen froze midair. That's not relevant to homeowner concerns. Actually, it's relevant to who owns the mailbox policy you're fining people under. A rustle moved through the room, neighbors shifting, whispering. Someone muttered, "Lease?" Marla cleared her throat. "The association maintains all necessary rights." I smiled. "Do you have proof of that renewal? Certified mail receipt, tracking number, timestamp?" Ken flipped through his binder, then closed it too quickly. "We'll provide documentation later." That's when I knew they had nothing. I thanked them and sat down, the tension thick enough to cut with a paperclip. Knowledge nugget number 3. Under standard corporate record-keeping laws, any renewal or contractual correspondence must be logged with date and sender identity. Missing that log doesn't just imply oversight, it proves non-compliance. The meeting ended in chaos. Marla banged the gavel so hard it cracked the base. People left buzzing like hornets. Frank caught up to me outside. "You just rattled her cage good," he said, lighting a cigarette he never finished. "Watch yourself. They don't like losing control." He was right. 2 days later, a letter appeared. Violation, unauthorized recording of meeting. They claimed I had used a hidden camera, which I hadn't. Still, I sent a polite reply citing the state's one-party consent rule and enclosed a notarized affidavit. No recording was made. I printed another copy for folder 4B. Each page added weight, literal and symbolic. That night, I heard a soft knock. Lila, holding her civics textbook. "Dad, Mrs. Parker said homeowners can recall a board. Is that true?" "It is," I said. "Takes a petition from 20% of the members." She nodded. "Maybe you should do that." Her logic was pure, simple. But I wasn't after a recall. I was after a reckoning. Over the next week, I quietly gathered allies. Frank, of course. Brenda, a teacher fined for her flower pots. And Sammy, an accountant who knew numbers better than the board ever would. We met in my garage with the door halfway down, fans buzzing, papers spread on the workbench. "Look," Samir said, tapping his calculator. "They collected $18,500 in fines this quarter alone. That's 22% of their total budget." "Revenue scheme," Brenda whispered. "Pattern of selective enforcement," I said. "If we can show it's discriminatory or financially motivated, that's actionable." We mapped every citation, every address. The clustering was obvious. 4 houses near the pond, 3 along Maple Row. Conveniently, those were all properties whose owners had questioned board decisions in the past year. That night, I sent an open records request to the HOA's management email, citing Section 13506. They had 10 business days to comply. June 18th, I found my trash cans overturned. June 19th, my sprinkler lines were cut. June 20th, someone egged my garage. I didn't react, didn't post, didn't yell. I installed a camera, visible, legal, and logged each incident by date and time. When Lila saw the footage of a shadow in a red blouse walking away, she whispered, "Is that?" I nodded. "Yeah, Marla. If you've followed this far, tell me, what's the right play when leadership breaks its own rules? Petition, lawsuit, or silent documentation until the moment counts most? I'm curious how you'd handle it, because mine was almost ready. 21 days remained on that lease clock, and I intended to let it run down to the final second before turning the key. By June 25th, the Ridgefield file box had grown so thick I had to reinforce the corners with duct tape. Each folder was tabbed, numbered, cross-referenced, photos, timestamps, certified letters. I could tell Mark was impressed when he stopped by that afternoon, thermos in hand, eyes scanning the organized chaos on my dining table. "You've built a better discovery file than most paralegals," he said. "I built it because they underestimated me," I said, "and because I like sleeping in my own house." He smirked. "You know the clock on that lease? What's the exact deadline?" "June 30th, 11:59 p.m., I said. "Certified mail timestamp required." He nodded. "Then they're down to 5 days. Don't interfere. Let them hang themselves with silence." But silence wasn't Marla's strong suit. That evening, another letter appeared. Emergency assessment, $175 for clubhouse maintenance. Due July 1st. The timing almost made me laugh. I walked the neighborhood with Frank just to clear my head. Fireflies blinked along the hedges, sprinklers hissed. "You think they'll realize the lease is expiring?" I asked. "Doubt it," he said. "They're too busy writing new fines." By the next morning, HOA volunteers were placing bright orange notices on doors. Mandatory community repainting project. I watched one flutter in the wind like a warning flag. It wasn't fear I felt anymore. It was anticipation, like the seconds before a storm breaks. Halfway through the day, my phone buzzed. An email from Northgate. "We have received no renewal communication. Absent immediate proof of such mailing by June 30th, the leasehold rights will revert to ownership control. We will recognize your prior inquiry as documentation of this lapse." I printed it, stamped the time, 3:17 p.m., and slid it into folder 5A, labeled simply, "Leverage." Now it was only a matter of letting the days run out. Tell me in the comments, if you knew your HOA's power hinged on one forgotten signature, would you expose it immediately, or wait until they crossed one more line? I'm curious how much patience you'd have in my place. June 28th, 8:46 a.m. Marla called me directly. Her tone was honey dipped in vinegar. "Eric, the board feels your behavior has become style. We're considering suspension of your voting rights pending review." "Review of what?" I asked. "Pattern of insubordination." I almost laughed. "You might want to review your lease first." "What lease?" she snapped. "You'll find out in 2 days." She hung up. I could practically hear the panic setting in. That night I walked out to the mailbox, our mailbox, and felt the warm metal under my fingers. I thought of Clara, how she used to say, "A house only becomes a home when the mail bears your name." I promised her then, quietly, that I'd keep that name where it belonged. June 30th arrived humid and still. By 10 p.m., the clubhouse lights were on. Cars clustered like fireflies. I stood across the street, camera in hand. Through the glass doors, I saw them printing something. Marla, Ken, the secretary. Rushed movements, whispered arguments. At 11:43 p.m., they sealed an envelope. Ken ran outside toward his car. I checked my watch, heart steady. The post office drop box was 3 miles away. Collection ended at 8 p.m. They missed it. At 11:59, I clicked a photo of the clubhouse clock on the wall through the window. Proof of time. Proof of failure. Reversal number 1 was complete. The next morning, I faxed Northgate the time-stamped photo. the HOA minutes showing no prior renewal discussion, and a certified affidavit from Frank verifying the clock time. At 10:12 a.m. their reply came. Effective immediately, Northgate assumes management of Ridgefield Commons common areas. Previous HOA restrictions on fixtures, landscaping, and mailboxes are suspended pending re-evaluation. Visual beat number 1, the fax machine light blinking green as that message printed, page curling warm into my hand. I didn't gloat. I simply stapled the page to the top of folder 5A and labeled it Control Restored. When the news hit the neighborhood group chat, the panic was deliciously silent. Perla didn't post a word. Frank dropped by with a grin. Guess the queen lost her crown. Not yet, I said. She'll try to pretend it's business as usual until the next board meeting. He raised an eyebrow. And then? Then, I said. We let her find out who's really running this neighborhood. And that's the question I'll ask you. When authority collapses under its own arrogance, should we rebuild it or replace it entirely? Because my plan wasn't just about winning. It was about reshaping what came next. 2 days after the lease expired, the air around Ridgefield Commons felt different, like the humidity broke. The mailboxes gleamed in the morning sun, and for once, the letters inside were just letters. But victories like this never come without the backlash. By July 2nd, the HOA's Facebook page lit up with posts under my name. Aggressive homeowner threatens community harmony. Screenshots of fabricated emails, doctored with my address. One even claimed I'd harassed board members in public. Frank knocked on my door, waving his phone. They're trying to smear you online, buddy. They don't even know you've already won. Doesn't matter, I said. Rumors move faster than facts. And that was true. By afternoon, 2 neighbors avoided eye contact while walking their dogs. Someone left a printout of the post in my mailbox. Irony so thick, it almost made me laugh. This was the retaliation montage in full swing. Anonymous tips to the city inspector, a trash citation that didn't exist, even a noise complaint logged at 3 a.m. when I was dead asleep. I logged everything, backed up footage twice. Each entry got a timestamp, signature, and file number. Documentation wasn't just defense. It was armor. But even armor has weight. One night, Lila asked if we could stay at her aunt's for the weekend. Just until they calmed down, she said softly. I saw her pack her school backpack with her toothbrush and favorite hoodie. That was my lowest point. Not anger, just the ache of watching your kid shrink from something she didn't deserve. The next morning, Mark Doctor opted by. They're hitting panic mode, he said. These false reports? They're desperate. I nodded. How do I make it stop? You don't. You outlast it. Let it hang them. He slid a folder across my counter. When the time's right, we'll file an administrative complaint, defamation and abuse of process. But not yet. You'll know when. That night, I opened the garage and stood among the files. The sound of a summer storm rolled through, rain tapping on the metal roof. I found folder 5A again, the lease proof, and something inside me steadied. If you were me, with everything documented, every lie archived, what would you do? Expose them now or let their own arrogance pile higher? Comment below. I want to know if patience still counts as power to you. 3 days later, I learned patience had its reward. Samir called around 7 a.m. You're not going to believe this. The HOA just sent an invoice to Northgate for landscaping reimbursement. $4,850. They billed the owner they forgot to renew with? He laughed. Exactly. Northgate forwarded it to me by mistake. They CC'd you too. It was a legal paradox. The HOA demanding payment from the entity that now controlled the property rights they lost. The proof was complete. A self-inflicted wound in PDF form. That afternoon, I prepared the evidence packet for the July 10th meeting. 40 pages, color-coded tabs, and a single-page summary labeled Non-Renewal Impact Summary. Knowledge nugget number 4. When an HOA acts beyond its authority, any contract or enforcement made during that lapse period is ultra vires, legally void and potentially fraudulent if used to collect money. Still, I didn't announce anything online. I waited. Because if this story had taught me anything, it's that the best retribution is delivered publicly and lawfully. The day before the meeting, Marla marched up my driveway again. Rain beaded on her red blouse. It's the same one I'd seen in the camera footage weeks earlier. "You've been interfering with board operations," she said. "You'll regret this when we take legal action." I looked at her, calm. Funny thing about legal action, it requires you to have standing. You might want to check your lease dates. Her eyes narrowed. "What lease dates?" "You'll find out tomorrow," I said, stepping back into my doorway. "Bring your lawyer." And that's what I'll ask you, watching this. What's justice supposed to look like? Is it quiet accountability or public exposure? Because tomorrow, I'd get to find out which one Ridgefield preferred. July 10th came heavy with heat, the kind that makes shirts stick and tempers shorter. The community room was packed, 40 chairs, all filled, people fanning themselves with agendas. I walked in with my folder under one arm. Calm, clean, pressed shirt. Marla was already at the table, lips tight, papers spread like a shield. The meeting started with the usual pleasantries. Budget, landscaping, holiday decorations, but everyone was waiting for the fireworks. I sat in the front row, file box at my feet. When new business appeared on the agenda, I raised my hand. "Eric Dawson, Lot 17. I'd like to present documentation regarding Ridgefield Commons Common Area lease status." Marla stiffened. "That's not on the agenda." "It's relevant to every rule you've enforced this year," I said, standing now, voice steady. "Especially those concerning mailboxes, landscaping, and fines." Her eyes flicked toward Ken, the treasurer, who suddenly found his tie fascinating. I placed a copy of the lease on the table, then the letter from Northgate, the time-stamped photo of their missed deadline. Each document landed with the weight of truth. "Per Clause 11, I read, "failure to renew by certified mail 30 days before expiration terminates the lease. Northgate confirmed no renewal was received." A murmur spread. Someone whispered, "So they don't own anything?" I looked up. "Not anymore." Marla's voice cracked. "That's absurd. The HOA's authority doesn't hinge on one piece of mail." From the back, a uniformed man stepped forward, a city inspector named Ruiz, clipboard in hand. "Actually, ma'am, it does. The lease defines the HOA's jurisdiction. Without it, your board's enforcement actions are null until reauthorized." Her jaw dropped. That was my neutral authority, validation in real time. He turned to me. "Mr. Dawson, your documentation is sufficient. The city recognizes Northgate as the interim controlling entity until a new agreement is executed." The room erupted, some cheering, some stunned silence. Marla gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "You blindsided us," she hissed. "No," I said. "You blinded yourselves." Visual beat number 2, the inspector stamping the official notice on the podium, ink bleeding slightly into the paper under the sweat of the crowd. That's when Frank spoke from the second row. "So all those fines we paid, do we get them back?" Ken's mouth opened, but no words came. I looked at Ruiz. He nodded. "If funds were collected without authority, reimbursement is required. We'll notify the Attorney General's office for review." It was domino time. Within 48 hours, 3 board members resigned. The HOA's insurer suspended their policy pending investigation. Local media called it the Ridgefield overreach. I didn't even have to talk. The documents did it for me. And you, watching this, what punishment fits when officials cross that line? Fines? Removal? Criminal charges? Where's the precedent supposed to land? I want your verdict. By July 14th, Ridgefield Commons was officially under audit. I kept my distance, watering the cedars Clara once wanted so badly. They swayed in the humid air, finally free of HOA regulations about height and spacing. Mark came by with a quiet smile. "You know, you could leverage this. You've got them cornered, money missing, recoat. RDS messy. You could push for change." I knew what he meant. Reversal number 2 wasn't about crushing them, it was about reform, the kind that lasts. "Let's draft terms," I said. "Fair ones." We worked through the night. Term limits for board members, mandatory transparency for budgets, public posting of meeting minutes, and a rollback of all unjust fines within 90 days. A new committee elected by secret ballot, monitored by the city. And the clause that mattered most, the Ridgefield Charter of Homeowner Rights, guaranteeing open access, free speech, and the right to dissent without penalty. The following evening, I slid the proposal across to the interim administrator. "Offer them this, amnesty in exchange for reform." He read, nodded. They'll take it. It's either this or bankruptcy. That was it, the second reversal already in motion. But before the ink dried, Marla showed up one last time, standing on the sidewalk as the sun bled out behind her. "You think you saved this place?" she said. I looked at her, calm again. "No, I just reminded it who it belongs to." The reform deal went through on a Wednesday evening, notarized at the city clerk's office. I didn't celebrate right away. The ink was still wet, and after months of tension, silence felt strange. The next morning, Ridgefield Commons woke to find a new notice, not a fine, not a threat, but a simple one-page announcement. Effective immediately, the HOA board is dissolved pending reformation under the Ridgefield Charter of Homeowner Rights. It was printed on plain paper, taped to the community bulletin board where all the warning letters used to go. No embossed seal, no bold font, just clarity. The sound of the paper slapping in the breeze outside the clubhouse was the cleanest sound I'd heard in months. By afternoon, local reporters showed up, hungry for quotes. I stayed off camera, let Frank handle it. He said exactly what needed saying. That's isn't revenge, it's correction. The next day, an email arrived from the state ethics office, confirmation that Marla and Ken were under investigation for misuse of authority and financial misconduct. They'd violated conflict of interest rules, approving vendor contracts tied to relatives. The same people who fined me for paint tone had been cutting checks to their own cousins. The dominoes fell exactly in sequence. Insurance carrier dropped their bond. Bank froze the HOA account pending audit. Northgate issued a press release. We support homeowner-led reform in Ridgefield Commons as a model for transparent governance. Watching the local 10 p.m. broadcast, I felt something more complex than triumph, relief threaded with grief. Clara should have been here to see it. She'd always believed fairness was possible if you just showed your receipts. That weekend, I stood outside the clubhouse with Mark and the inspector, Ruiz. The new sign was going up. Fresh wood, hand-painted letters by Lila and her friends. Ridgefield Commons, a community, not a corporation. "Looks good," Ruiz said, signing the final inspection tag. "You ever think about running the new board?" I shook my head. "My work's done. This place belongs to everyone now." Mark laughed. "You sound like a man walking away from a movie ending." "Maybe," I said, "but every movie needs an afterword." So here's mine. To you watching. Have you ever faced a system that punished you for doing the right thing? Did you fight it or fold? Because sometimes the only thing scarier than losing is realizing you can win, but then have to lead after. Tell me your take. Visual beat number 3. That old violation notice curling in the fire pit behind my house, edges blackening, ashes lifting like dust. 3 weeks later, the audit closed. The HOA's previous leadership agreed to restitution, $14,200 repaid to homeowners, plus a 2-year probation ban from any board service. The Ridgefield Charter was officially recorded in county archives. Real change, stamped and sealed. News outlets called it the Ridgefield Precedent. Local councils asked for copies of the charter template. The Ombudsman's office even posted a bulletin, example of corrective community governance. But the best part wasn't the recognition. It was the quiet. No more orange papers, no more threats. Just the sound of sprinklers and kids' bikes on pavement again. The night the new board was sworn in, I sat on my porch with Lila. She handed me a small metal plate she'd found in a craft store, engraved with 3 words, "We belong here." I nailed it to the mailbox post, right above the flag. And if you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so the next story finds you first. Share this so others learn what lawful persistence can build. That part's on us. Because justice isn't about payback. It's about setting things straight so the next person doesn't have to fight as hard. And as I turned off the porch light that night, I thought about how every story starts the same way. A letter, a rule, a line crossed, but ends however brave you are willing to be. Next case? Let's just say a certain HOA 2 towns over just raised dues without a vote. A month later, Ridgefield looked almost unrecognizable in the best way possible. The lawns still matched, but now by choice, not decree. Kids rode bikes without parents scanning for inspectors. The community mailbox stand, once a symbol of tension, was now freshly painted by volunteers, each panel signed with initials in tiny brushstrokes. The charter worked. Meetings were open, minutes posted online, budgets itemized down to the penny. Every voice got its turn. Transparency wasn't chaos. It was oxygen. One evening, a reporter from Channel 9 asked me on camera, what was the turning point? I thought about it. Not the night of the confrontation or the insp. Ector's stamp. But the first letter, $350 for a mailbox, I didn't change. When they confused authority with ownership, I said, that's when they lost. Afterward, I walked the perimeter path around the pond, the same pond that had once been an HOA-controlled restricted amenity. Now it belonged to all of us. Lila and her friends were stringing lights along the railing, preparing for what the new board called Community Restoration Day. It wasn't about fundraising or branding, it was about neighbors showing up. Frank sat on a bench nearby, thermos in hand. "You ever miss the fight?" he asked. I smiled. "No, I like the sound of sprinklers better." He laughed, wheezy as ever. "You did good, Eric. You turned red tape into fertilizer." That line stuck with me. At the opening ceremony, Ruiz stood by with the new city liaison, signing the last clearance papers. Kids ran past waving tiny flags. Mark handed me a framed copy of the reform agreement. The ink faded to soft gray. "Proof," he said, "that paperwork can be poetic." In the weeks that followed, little ripples spread outward. Letters from other neighborhoods asking for the Ridgefield Charter template. One from Southwood Hills, another from Mason Oaks. One even from a retired HOA president who wrote, "I wish someone had done this 10 years ago. We forgot we served people, not power." That letter sits in my file box now, the last document in folder 5A. And if you believe I fought the right way, and this is how it should end, say a few words in the comments for your friend. Subscribe so future videos reach you first. Share this so others learn how to stand their ground the lawful way. That's on us. Because when I tell you every signature, every timestamp, every photo mattered, it did. It's how justice actually happens. Small, factual, patient. The Ridgefield Charter went into effect exactly 90 days after that fall. First expired lease. HOA dues dropped by 15%. Meetings now start with a pledge, not to rules, but to reason. And on the mailbox I fought to keep, there's still that little plate Lila gave me. We belong here. Last week, a new neighbor moved in. Single mom, 2 kids, nervous smile. She asked, "Is the HOA strict here?" I chuckled. "No, not anymore. Around here, we work things out before they turn into rules." As I walked back up the driveway, I could hear the faint buzz of the community lights clicking on, reflections dancing across the pond. Somewhere in that glow, I felt Clara close by, her dream of fairness finally rooted deep. Then my phone buzzed. An email from a resident in another county. Subject line, HOA board threatens eviction over garden shed. Need advice. I sighed, smiling to myself. Every piece has its sequel. And just like that, the next case began.